So I'd like to continue the discussion about foreign exchange markets in this video. If you recall, when we talked about the foreign exchange market, we had a couple of important points that we noted. One, it's a very competitive market with literally billions of dollars, even trillions across all currencies traded every day. So it's lots of participants, lots of volume. The exchange rate, the price in that foreign exchange market, is the price of one currency in terms of another. That exchange rate is determined by the interaction of supply and demand, like other markets. And the market participants are buyers of foreign goods, services, and assets who go to the foreign exchange market in order to get the foreign currency in order to complete these transactions. We also have the possibility of people who are buying the currency purely for speculative purposes, trying to essentially make bets on where the exchange rate's going, but we'll hold off on that for a later video. Now, the other thing I want to note at the beginning here is that, broadly speaking, there are two different types of foreign exchange markets. These are the polar opposites. One, which we know as being flexible or floating exchange rate systems, is where the private market determines the exchange rate that actually is in the market. So this is kind of the traditional exchange rate system. A fixed exchange rate system is influenced by government intervention into the foreign exchange market, trying to fix or influence the exchange rate by market participants. So this, even with fixed exchange rates, there are private suppliers and demanders of the currency, but the government intervenes in order to fix or influence the exchange rate. We'll talk about that in much greater detail in a subsequent video. So we have this foreign exchange market for pounds depicted here, where we've got the supply of pounds on this axis, the quantity of pounds on this axis, the price of pounds on this axis, which is how many dollars it takes to buy a pound. So it's dollars per pound. So that's the price of pounds. Now, for those of you who remember the supply curve in a standard microeconomics course, the height of the supply curve reflected the cost of the marginal cost of producing a product. That clearly is not relevant here, because we're talking about a currency, the marginal cost of which is almost zero. Instead, the supply here represents how much the suppliers of pounds are willing to bring pounds to the marketplace in order to get dollars. Okay, so I want to just pull out a couple of numbers here. For example, let's say that at $1 per pound, that there are 20 pounds, or 20 billion, or 20 trillion pounds that would be supplied by British citizens coming to the foreign exchange market to get dollars in order to buy American goods, services, and assets. Okay, and then let's say that the price of pounds went to $3 per pound, and that at this exchange rate, there are 120 pounds that are offered. So what you see here is, as the price of pounds goes up, a pound buying $1 in the foreign exchange market as opposed to $3 in the foreign exchange market, more pounds will be offered by Brits in order to get American stuff. Okay, so this is the supply side. Again, these numbers pulled out of the air, but it's to give you an indication of what we're talking about. We could have a private demand for pounds by Americans who want to buy British stuff. And so we will depict that on a separate graph right now. We'll combine them in just a minute. Let's say at $3 per pound, Americans only, so this is when the pound is expensive, Americans say only want to have want to demand 20 pounds. As the pound becomes cheaper, Americans want to buy more pounds because British goods, services, and assets are going to be cheaper. So this is the supply and demand side of this market. But now we want to talk about the equilibrium price. And when we talk about the equilibrium price, we want to bring this supply and demand together. So let me redraw this using the same numbers. Okay, we've got the supply, private supply of pounds. We've got the private demand for pounds at $3 per pound. We had 120 pounds that were offered, but only 20 pounds demanded. At $1 per pound, we had 20 pounds supplied, 120 pounds demanded. So neither one of these exchange rates are going to be an equilibrium exchange rate in the foreign exchange market. So let's talk about this one up at the top first, this $3 per pound. What you have here is an excess supply of private pounds in the foreign exchange market. Now put private in there because I'm going to make a distinction but in a fixed exchange rate system in a later video. So what we have here is 100 pounds that's being supplied in the market beyond what is being demanded. So that exchange rate will need to change. It will have to adjust. And as in any market, when there's an excess supply, the price of the thing in the market is going to fall. So an excess supply of pounds means that the price of pounds will fall. In the terminology of a foreign exchange market, the falling price of pounds means that the pound will depreciate. Not devalue, depreciate. The depreciation is a response to market conditions. So the excess supply of pounds will push the price of pound down. The pound will depreciate to say something like, I don't know, we'll just pull this again out of the air, $2 per pound. And let's say that is 80 pounds that are supplied and 80 pounds that are demanded in the foreign exchange market. So there's an equilibrium price, an exchange rate that satisfies supply and demand conditions. Okay? If instead the exchange rate was at $1 per pound, so that we had 20 pounds that were supplied and 120 pounds demanded. So let me add this up here. So at $3 per pound, we had excess supply of pounds. At $1 per pound, there's an excess demand of pounds. When the demand exceeds the supply in a market, the price rises. So the price of pounds will rise. What we call that is an appreciation. So the pound will appreciate. Up to, again, this $2 per pound. So there are a couple of things to note about this depiction, which will be very important as we go along. One, you should think of pressures for a depreciation of a currency being associated with an excess supply of that currency. There's more supply of that currency than there is demanded. If there's pressure for an appreciation of a currency, that means that there's excess demand. So I think this is important enough that I really want to write this separately, just to emphasize. So it's important that you associate these two ideas together. Excess supply of a currency again, I'm going to put private. Excess private supply of a currency will cause a pressure for depreciation. Okay, this is one of these things that you should put a star next to any notes that you might be taking about this, because this is a really important idea. Excess private demand for a currency pressure for appreciation. Just as important. Now, in a flexible exchange rate system, which we've talked about right now, these pressures for depreciation or appreciation, depending on the situation, are allowed to occur. You have the price of the currency changing as a consequence of these underlying pressures. In a fixed exchange rate regime, which we'll talk about in much more detail, this pressure for depreciation is thwarted, is counteracted by the actions of a government. But that doesn't mean that there isn't this pressure underneath the system. So, talk a little bit about the foreign exchange market, the appreciation and depreciation, with these two particular points of special importance. So, got other YouTube videos about the economics content up here at this YouTube site. So I hope you can find this helpful and other videos as well.